Welcome to Tax Break. My name is Robert Kovacev, and I'm a member of the tax group at Miller & Chevalier in Washington, D.C., where my practices focus on tax controversy and litigation. It is my pleasure to introduce my friend and my new M&C colleague, Katherine Jordan. Katherine is an experienced tax litigator with experience at the tax court, in-house, and in private practice, and we're delighted to have her on our team. Katherine joined us as counsel in October 2025 after spending 7 years in-house as the director of tax controversy for a real estate firm. In that position, she personally handled all aspects of the company's tax controversies before the IRS, from exam and through appeals. She also directed litigation strategy in several tax court, district court, and appellate court cases. Prior to her time in-house, Katherine practiced tax controversy and estate planning at 2 law firms and clerked for Judge Naga at the U.S. Tax Court for 2.5 years. She's a graduate of the University of Virginia Law School and Duke University. Katherine, welcome aboard.
Thank you for having me.
So, now that you're back in private practice, what are the biggest differences that you see between being in-house versus being in a firm?
There are a lot of differences. Of course, any attorney would tell you that billing hours is the major difference between being in-house and being at a law firm. But being in-house, you really become the expert in your industry, and you have to get to know the industry and make tax work for the business. I think as tax attorneys, we're always focused on what is the right answer in terms of tax, and that may not necessarily be the right answer for the company or for the industry that you're in. So taking a broader view of what the company needs and not being laser focused on just the tax elements is important. The other thing is that obviously in a law firm, you have multiple clients. As counsel, I might be working for multiple partners. And so I find myself in the position of having now to work with multiple bosses effectively. Whereas when I was in-house, I had one client, one boss, one objective. So it's very different now having to reorient my brain and switch between clients, between matters. It's good. I mean, it's challenging. I enjoy it, but it's definitely different from having only one sort of set of priorities to worry about.
Now, there are some taxpayers who are audited very frequently, but there are a lot that only, occasionally, maybe even once, will get a notice from the IRS saying that they're under audit. For those people, what would be the advice that you would give to any in-house professionals of that business about what to do if you're targeted by an IRS audit?
Sure. This is a great question. As tax controversy attorneys, we take notices of audits and selection for examination in stride. It's a normal part of your everyday life and my everyday life, but that's not the case for the vast majority of people. To be audited is something that can be very scary, and it can be scary for a company or for an individual. And being able to recognize that this is sort of a normal thing that happens, albeit not frequently to a lot of people, and trying to take a calm approach to it is the best way you can do it. Be kind to the auditor, to any of the chief counsel who are involved, because they're just doing their job. And 9 times out of 10, if you can collaborate with the agent, you're going to get a better result no matter what the end result is. And when I say end result, I mean even if you get an adjustment, there are other things that you might need from the agent. You might want to get a copy of the administrative file. You might need some collaboration with them going forward if you go to appeals or if you go to tax court. So you want to have a good relationship with the people on the other side. And that starts with just being kind and nice to them and trying to work with them to get them what they need to do their job. The other thing is when you're in-house, I mean, at a law firm, everybody you work with is an attorney or in some way is supporting the attorney's work, whether that's paralegals or administrative assistants. Those people are all sort of within the realm of privilege. That's not true when you're in-house. And I think a lot of in-house attorneys may forget that if you're sharing documents with people who aren't attorneys, you might be breaking privilege. When I was in-house, I was always pretty strategic about not using the company's document repository for anything that I wanted to make sure could retain privilege. So I had a separate system for keeping documents that were privileged. I was always very strategic about copying people on emails, and having conversations with others in the company about that and about why sometimes I couldn't share things with them or couldn't be a part of what it was that they were doing. When I was in-house, I was on the controversy side. I had no involvement in the transactional side of the business except for general advice about what might happen if something were to come up for audit. Um, and I'm sure I sounded like a broken record because I would go explain to people over and over again that it's not a great idea for me to be on the planning side of things if I'm later in the position of defending what went on, which was not always people always didn't always accept that. They didn't understand, well, hey, if you know this area, why can't you just help us out on this side of things? But being mindful of privilege to the extent that you want to retain that for any future IRS audit is always beneficial. And then, like I said, it's a general piece of advice, maybe not specific to in-house people, but trying to work collaboratively with the IRS to the extent possible.
Well, I think that's excellent advice that you want to be sure to have as good a collaborative effort and working in, being able to work with IRS agents and chief counsel. I know this has happened for you, the same as happened to me. That doesn't always work out, and sometimes their IRS is much more combative than you would expect, even sometimes right out of the gate. What do you do in that instance if you're in house and you're faced with that situation?
I mean, you want to document everything if it crosses any lines. The Taxpayer Bill of Rights gives taxpayers the right to courteous service, but there's no real enforcement mechanism if the IRS agent or somebody else you're dealing with does not follow that mandate. And I have dealt with some agents who are downright nasty to me. And unfortunately, there's not a whole lot that you can do. And the best thing you can do in that situation potentially is to try to go to their manager and explain what's going on, but the managers are going to be very protective of their personnel as well. And that's just life. Sometimes you encounter people that are difficult to work with. Like I said, documenting everything if it's a major problem. But again, not only does being collaborative with IRS people help with the entire course of the audit, but there is a provision, as I'm sure you're aware, for potentially getting attorney's fees if you end up winning. And one of the key things is that you have to have worked with the IRS during the audit. You have to have cooperated. And so you're much more likely to get an acknowledgement of cooperation if you in fact cooperated and weren't fighting even what can be a really difficult agent. There's an attorney I've worked with over the years who has this saying, how do you defeat your enemy? You make him your friend. And it sounds rather obnoxious to just try to win people over with kindness. And it's not, I will tell you, that's not like a natural thing of mine. I mean, I got banned from playing board games as a child with my family because I'm so competitive. But that's definitely not the right approach always when you're dealing with a human being on the other side who, again, is just trying to do their job.
So I'd like to kind of flip this a little bit. Since you've been on both sides of the table, what are things that practitioners in private practice should know about working with in-house counsel?
Uh, well, like I said before, in-house counsel are the experts in their business and in their company. They have to be. They have to know the industry that they're working for. And so probably a lot of outside counsel come in thinking that they're going to be the ones to counsel the client, but that has to go two ways in order for it to be effective. So recognizing that the in-house counsel is going to know their company, their industry, and the people involved better than you are. I mean, there were a lot of times that I would spend with outside counsel filling them in on some of the personnel details that they otherwise would be unfamiliar with. This is how this person likes to operate, this is how this person likes things done. And it makes things go a lot more smoothly if you can anticipate sort of some of the personal needs of the people that you're working with in-house, and the people who are not attorneys within that organization. And so the in-house counsel is going to be the bridge between the company and you as outside counsel to be able to effectively manage the client, manage the audit, or if it's litigation, to go forward with that.
So, thinking about the controversy practice, what are the things that you consider key to success in building such a practice?
Being all-knowing, obviously. I'm kidding. Obviously, nobody knows everything. That was something that when I was in-house, there would be attorneys who would try to present themselves as knowing everything about everything, and I sometimes found that really difficult to believe because it's just not true. And we all have areas that we know a lot about, but then we also, tax controversy is so broad and there's so many little subsets of it. And it's great to have somebody who's had experience with a particular issue before, but sometimes it can be helpful to have somebody come in with fresh eyes who hasn't done something and approach it in a novel way. And I know that you and I probably have encountered that where, oh gosh, I haven't dealt with this issue, or it's been, 10 years since I've worked on this issue. Going to other people within our field and saying, hey, do you know anything about, you know, comparable uncontrolled pricing, for example, a transfer pricing element? What can you tell me about the development of the law in this area? Being able to acknowledge your weaknesses basically is, I think, critical to growing as an attorney generally. And that's true regardless of whether you're a tax controversy attorney or another specialist. Um, the other thing is that uh, it I find that being able to understand the people all around me helps me with whatever I'm doing. I have two small children who are 4 and 6, and so I sometimes read parenting books in my spare time. And about 4 years ago, I found myself inadvertently using some of the tips from a book that I had been reading about how to deal with toddlers on my coworkers. And I don't mean for that to come across as infantilizing. It's very basic. It turns out small children are small people and they want to have their emotions validated and they want to be listened to and treated with respect just like adults. And so sometimes when I would have issues arise with coworkers, I would find myself thinking, okay, acknowledge feelings, use I words, ask them what they want to resolve the issue, which were all things that I picked up from parenting books. And once I realized that worked, I started taking a little bit more of an intentional approach to it, of trying to understand some of the human psychology around the people I work with. Um, one of the books I read has this very short sentence that I think about very frequently. It was something like, logic and reason don't drive decisions, emotions do. And when you consider that as an explanation for behavior, it makes all the sense in the world, because sometimes you look at what people have done and you go, why would you have done this? This doesn't make any sense. And it's because it doesn't make sense, but it was the emotional decision. And so I always try to, whenever I'm dealing with somebody, understand where they're coming from and what matters to them, because if you can understand that, it's going to unlock a whole lot more in terms of being able to work with them. In my old job, everybody in the company had to take personality tests, and we were grouped into these 4 categories, and it was a diagram of a circle. Um, and the one of the wedges of the circle was my category D, dominant, like a dominant personality, somebody who comes in who's not afraid of conflict, who doesn't take offense to having sort of hard conversations. And that was true of everybody in the tax group. We would sort of get in a room and have these um, very direct conversations. And it wasn't until we took these personality tests that we sort of realized why it was harder to work with some of the other departments that didn't have those personality types. But it was helpful to understand where other people are coming from, because they may not want the super direct communication. You might need to open an email with, "Hey, how are you? How was your weekend?" Get into the personal things before you dive into the ask of what you need, which is not, again, my instinct. My instinct is to just get down to brass tacks. Let's go ahead and get rolling with this. But um, being able to understand who you're working with I think, is really critical.
Now, that is incredible advice. What are I words? You said that earlier. I'm not familiar with that term.
Oh, it's that when you encounter an issue with somebody, you don't lead with you. So, for example, Rob, you redlined this document in a way that I found offensive. It's
Mhm.
Hey, Rob, I understood the task to be this. How can I fix this going? Or it's basically putting the burden on your own interpretation of things so that people don't feel attacked. It's I felt this about what you did. And it's not accusing the other person of undertaking an action. You're saying this is how I felt about it. So I words, yeah.
Okay, no, that's really helpful. So, kind of along the same vein, if you're talking to someone who's just starting out, a junior lawyer who decided that she wanted to be a controversy lawyer, what advice would you have for that person?
Oh, I would have a lot of advice. I mean, I'm sure that every seasoned attorney looks back at when they first started practicing and realizes that they knew nothing. But at the time, you think you know everything because you have this shiny new law degree, and gosh, you're a lawyer now. You know how to practice law, and that couldn't be further from the truth. Um, I think a classic mistake a lot of junior attorneys make is to think that the assignment is about speed. Get this back to the attorney who gave it to you as quickly as possible, and don't ask questions because you don't want to look like you don't know what you're doing. And that's the worst possible way you could go about it, because I think that a junior attorney who does that is never going to have a good work product. Um, so stopping and asking clarifying questions, asking for how would you approach this if you were in my position, can be very helpful just to actually building better work product. And then the flip side of that is asking for feedback once something is finished. So, and I still fail in this area sometimes, because I think when I finish something, my instinct is, okay, let's move on to the next thing. But if you don't stop and ask the partner or the other attorney you're working with, hey, how was this thing that I did? How can I improve? You'll never know the areas where you fell short, because the attorney that you might have been doing it for will go through and change the things that they want to change, but never tell you what it was. And so then you can't anticipate in the future what you should have done in the first place. So asking questions, asking for feedback is going to improve you as an attorney. I was very lucky, um, that I've been lucky over the years that I've had good bosses, and some of them have been hard on me, but it's always made me a better attorney to get that feedback and that constructive criticism. Or sometimes it's not even constructive criticism; it's just criticism, and you have to sort of take your licks and do with that, what you will. But nobody's perfect, especially when you're starting out. And so understanding where you need to improve is going to be critical to making you a better attorney. And the tax controversy bar is also fairly small. When I think about the people in this space, uh, there's not, obviously tax is a larger field than tax controversy, and so you do see the same people in this space over and over again. Um, Knowing that and getting to know people so that you can network with them and get advice sometimes when you need advice from somebody outside your organization, is very, I think, helpful to anybody in a career to have sort of a mentor that they can go to, or attorneys in other organizations they might call on for assistance. And it can be a good referral source too, if you're looking at it strategically. Of other firms may not be able to handle the type of work that they get, and they need somebody to refer it to. Having a good network is helpful to building a successful practice.
Yeah, absolutely. So, changing gears a little bit, the IRS has changed a lot over even the past 10 years, and it's the agency has gone through some ups and some downs, and right now as we record this, they're just starting to come back online after the government shutdown. How has dealing with the IRS changed for you over the course of your career, and how do you think it's going to change in the next few years?
Um, well, that's a tricky one. It's gotten a little bit less collaborative. I mean, I used to have interactions with agents where it was, let's see what the right result is and let's see how we can get somewhere that serves the government's interests but also makes the taxpayer happy. Um, I've seen a lessening of that in recent years. I've seen more of this funnel towards litigation as the end all be all of tax controversy, which is, I don't think, the right approach. I mean, the tax court only has 19 federally appointed judges, and then it has senior judges and special trial judges, but with only let's call it 30 judges in total. I'm not sure exactly how many there are. Having the judges be the final arbiter of tax controversy is just not um, it's just not feasible when the tax court handles thousands upon thousands of cases every year. So having that collaboration diminish, I think, is a loss for the tax field as a whole. And I hope that we can see some more movement back to getting the IRS Independent Office of Appeals able to dispose of cases, having alternatives to litigation like mediation or arbitration would be helpful. Um, the IRS has always struggled with technology, and it's they've gotten a little bit better in recent years. Um, but it's not unusual to still get faxes. They're e-faxes, but you still get faxes from agents. And the IRS is a paper-bound uh, agency. I mean, it's normal for an audit to open, and the agent requests a copy of the tax return from the client because they don't have a copy of the tax return, which sounds ridiculous because how do they know how to audit something if they haven't even looked at the return? But that's just the way it is. It's sometimes it's really hard on these agents to get copies of things that they need to do their job because of the technological limitations that the IRS has. To go back to what I was saying earlier about trying to work collaboratively with them, if it might be easier for you to give something to them than for them to get it. Um, the government, as far as I'm aware, is not permitted to use AI, and it probably shouldn't be, at least until 6103 limitations can be ironed out with respect to AI. But again, it's like the world has moved on in a lot of ways in terms of tech, and the IRS has consistently lagged behind, and that's a difficulty that I think is only going to continue to grow as the private sphere embraces these technological advances, and the government just can't. And the IRS has also had its ranks thinned over the years. I mean, we're way far off from where we were 10, 15 years ago in terms of staffing. So it's more difficult sometimes to get assistance on something that you need help with from an agent or from an appeals officer. I mean, it's not uncommon to have things scheduled for 6 months, a year out, because it just takes that long to get people in the room with you who can help you with your case.
So now for some shameless self-promotion. You had your pick of firms, I know, when you were looking to come back to private practice. You chose Miller and Chevalier, and which we're all very happy about. What was it that made you pick us? And what are the things that, in your mind, make Miller and Chevalier special?
Shameless self-promotion, indeed. I wanted to work for a smaller law firm, and I have friends who are in some of the bigger firms, and they enjoy it, but I wanted something that was a bit more focused. And the fact that M&C is on the smaller side, it's only about 100 attorneys, and they're all in DC, is something that I was looking for. Um, and the people who work here, I mean, their reputations are stellar, and my experience so far has been fabulous. I mean, everybody's been knowledgeable, collegial, helpful. Those were all the things that I was looking for my own longevity, because I didn't want to go someplace where those things were lacking and then make a change within a few years.
Great. Great. Well, Katherine, thanks so much for your time and for sharing your thoughts with us. And thank you to everyone for listening. This is Tax Break.
Thank you, Rob.
Produced by Heartcast Media.